Watch, I'm Kriti Mishra. The Ministry of Labour and Employment has put up the preliminary draft rules under Section 67 of the Code on Wages. It has invited inputs from stakeholders and the general public within a month. Apart from the formula for calculating the minimum wage rate and norms for bonus payments, the draft recommends 9-hour working days with 1 day of rest every week. The code is in line with the government's objective to simplify and rationalize various central labour laws into 4 different codes. That is, Code on Wages, Code on Social Security, Code on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions, and Code on Industrial Relations. And to get deeper insights on the topic, I'm joined by Mr. Shankar Agarwal, former Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Employment, Dr. Jatinder Singh, Director, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Michael Dice, Secretary, the Employers Association of Delhi. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, all of you. Mr. Agarwal, let me come to you first. Take us through the highlights and crucial, important elements of the draft Code on Wages rules.
Ma'am, as you said in your initial comments, we are trying to replace the 44 labor laws, central labor laws, with only 4 central labor codes. That was the first objective, so that it becomes simplified. And it is extremely difficult for any entrepreneur to adhere to these 44 labor laws. So that was one. Under the wages, there is different definition of wages under different act at the moment. So we thought that it would be a good idea to create a new wage code, and under that wage code, let us define the wages for all time to come, so that there is no ambiguity regarding the definition of wage, whether it includes bonus, it does not include bonus, or what all components are constituted, are part of the wages. That was one. Secondly, regarding the payment of wages, there is a huge problem regarding the payment of wages, whether the wages can be paid in cash, whether the wages can be paid in through the bank account, or can it be transferred electronically. So we have made it very clear that this will be the system, or this will be the mechanism to transfer the wages into the account of an employee. Then the overtime, what constitutes overtime, what is the maximum ceiling, and that kind of thing. And in addition to that, the working hours, as you said in the beginning. And thereafter, if you look into the act itself, it says that this has been left to the state governments and the other, and that will come under the rules. And that's why these draft rules have been put in the public domain to seek their comments, their suggestion, and thereafter a call will be taken thereafter.
And to further simplify the labour laws in the country.
You see, idea is basically to look after the interests of the worker while ensuring that the employers also do not get hassled by delinquent employees and indisciplined employees. That's the idea.
Absolutely, sir. We were talking about the 9-hour working shift. Dr. Singh, let me come to you. The 9-hour working shift that the draft talks about. Tell us about the global practices and standards, and is it in consonance with legal aspects and requirements?
See, as far as this 9-hour working rule goes, right now there is some ambiguity, because if you see the calculation of 26 days multiplied by 8 hours, it says that X amount is calculated on the basis of 8 hours for 26 days. Now, whether we will be multiplying this 9 hours with this 26 days, or maybe like lesser day, again that is a question. Now, as far as global practices are concerned, in a lot of the things, as we know that right now we are going in gig economy framework, wherein in most of the global practices, particularly for regular employment, we are seeing that people are seeking part-time employments. But on an average, globally it has been seen that 8 hours is the norm, and normally it's followed by the ILO conventions also. And as per the rule goes, particularly in India as such, I think the rationale behind this 9 hours may be to increase the labor productivity. Whatever work they were doing in 8 hours, probably there will be an 8 hours plus X type of, the quality or quantity of that material or production factor that may be accounted for. But I think that if they are going for 9 hours, then probably it should be then 5 working days rather than 6 working days.
We'll get clarity from Mr. Dice. Mr. Dice, 9-hour working shift.
Let me be honest with you. I think this rule has not been correctly done. Rule 6, subclause 4, it says nothing in this rule shall be deemed to affect the provisions of the Factories Act. And section 51 of the Factories Act clearly says, and I quote, no worker shall be required or allowed to work in a factory for more than 48 hours in a week. So people working in a factory are in one scenario, and people working in a shop's commercial establishment scenario would be entirely different. I think there's something fundamentally, glaringly wrong in the way they've designed it. I mean, I'm not taking an issue that don't have 9 hours or have 8 hours. I'm not on that. What I'm merely saying is what is stated in the rules itself is contradictory, because at one stage you are saying 9 hours work, at another stage you are saying 8 hours work. It needs clarity.
Mr. Agarwal, clarity on this particular issue?
You see, when we talk about the Factories Act, that is meant for the factories worker. Here we are talking about the employees who are working in establishments or shops. For that, as per the definition given in the rules, and these are draft rules at the moment. These
Yes.
are not come into existence. So what they are saying that a person, if you look what is the practice today, people come to the shops or the establishment at around 9 o'clock, 9:30, and they work till 6 o'clock, 6:30 till the shops close. So that means about 9 hours. Otherwise, what will happen? You will be asked to engage at least 2 workers for working, say, between 10 o'clock in the morning till, say, 8 o'clock in the evening. So idea is basically that we will not ask anyone to work for more than 9 hours, and the calculation for the minimum wages will be on the basis of 8-hour kind of thing, and there is an ambiguity. Yes, I agree with that, and that will get clarified once we go in for the finalization of the draft rules.
And of course, these are just draft rules and
Absolutely.
public comments have been invited. But Dr. Singh, coming to you again, what would be the method of fixing minimum wage rate, and how is it going to be different from the present criterion?
See, right now the formula, this rule says that the category, or you can say the criterion for fixing minimum wages will be in terms of considering a total family unit as 3 units, which comprise the workman along with spouse and 2 children. And each unit is consuming 2,700 kilocalories of food, that is the daily requirement, with 66 meters of annual clothes they have to wear, and on that there is another house rent expenses, that is total 10% of this food and this clothing requirement. Above that, there is a calculation of the fuel and electricity that amounts to 20% of the minimum wages, and for education, for medical thing, for contingencies on recreation, there is another 25% of the minimum wages. So this formula has been laid down as per there was a Reptacos judgment in 1992
Yes.
between the Secretary versus Reptacos. This was Supreme Court judgment, and also then it was ratified by ILO 1957 also. So I am sure that this is the basic foundation, although many trade unions are cribbing on it, that rather than considering 3 units, it should be 6 units, wherein the parents of the workers should also be taken into consideration, because now considering the longevity, considering that people are now again living together, the parents are living with some of the workers also. So probably there is again ambiguity, and I think there was internal committee which was formed by the Labour Ministry. They have recommended this unit as 3.6 units, but again this rule says that it should be restricted to 3 units. So this is one of the basis for formulation of minimum wages.
Mr. Dice, with this kind of calculation, we'll certainly see a hike in minimum wages?
Absolutely, we will see a hike in minimum wages, but more fundamentally, I think the fact that the law has straight-jacketed the mechanism, methodology and procedure for determining wages, I think is not correct. The reason why I'm saying it is, the workforce is extremely dynamic. Today you have a gig economy. Today you have the millennials at the workplace. Their entire approach, their entire concept is entirely different. So I'm sorry to say, but the code hasn't taken into consideration the needs and requirements of these aspects also of society in which we live.
And how will we fix the floored wage? What would be the method and manner for fixing the floor?
Well, I think the government is going to come into greater detail as to how they propose to do it, because it's going to be a very difficult type of a balancing act, because at one level you'll have floor wages, another level you'll have minimum wages. We'll have to wait for the ministry to explain exactly how they want to take it
Mr.
forward.
Agarwal, you wanted to come on this?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, basically when we say minimum wages, that means the assured minimum wages is nothing but a floor wage. Idea is that for the entire country there should be some kind of a certain floor minimum wages. Thereafter it is up to the state government to increase this further. Otherwise, suppose we say that the minimum wage is suppose say 1,000 rupees per day. I am just giving an example.
Yes.
And the state government of Assam says that no, we will pay only 200 rupees per day. It has got no meaning, that means. So what we are trying to say that there will be a floor wage, and thereafter the state government will be free. However, the floor wages as well as the minimum wages had to be fixed on the basis of certain criteria, and that criteria has already been given by the Supreme Court judgment. On the basis of that, then there is a board constituted for this purpose, and the board will look into all these aspects and then suggest different wages for different areas, for different skills and things like that.
We'll talk about the board in just a bit, but the minimum wages in states will vary according to the geographical locations.
Sure.
How will these classifications work out?
So again, if you look into the law, it says that this board will decide what kind of a wages are to be given, depending upon the geographical requirement and circumstances.
Yes, sir.
So this draft, which we read carefully, it has divided total area into 3 geographical locations. The metropolitan area constituting 40 lakh plus population, the non-metropolitan between 10 to 40 lakhs, and less than is basically the rural areas. So depending on the geographical location, also depending on the arduousness of work, whether the work is, it is in harsh condition, it requires lot of temperature, humidity, accordingly the fixation and balancing act will be done. So as such, those criteria has not been laid down, but I am sure that with the type of recommendations the government is asking, and since there are multiple stakeholders, again considering our industry as highly diverse, considering our industry that a lot of informal economy also working with this, how this is going to dovetail so that everybody is getting a decent quality of life, that is a question mark at this point in time. But definitely we are sure that at least these draft rules, they have laid a foundation on which, layer by layer, some intellectual mechanism can go in terms of understanding what is the real time of, quality of life for a particular person that person is entitled to.
Absolutely, sir, but experts have also raised concern over linking of non-food expenditure like housing, rent allowance to food expenditure, saying that workers would constantly migrate towards the urban centers.
Yeah. See, again, there is a dichotomy here, because right now, if you remember that our late President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, he laid the philosophy of Pura PURA, provision of urban amenities in rural areas, wherein we need to, stop this migration. And considering this fact, when we are saying that lot of, the consumerism has gone to rural areas also, wherein people are now migrating to some of the areas where there is, you can say the minimum wages are more as compared to the states where they are living in. But over the past years, we have seen the trend, and particularly with MG Narega also, most of the workers, they are trying to confine themselves in their own locality. Although urbanization is definitely required for a growing economy like India, but at the same time, considering the food expenditure and non-food expenditure, again there is a lot of array of things that goes in, because what we see, it has to be actually linked with the behavior of the workers as such. Because what we have seen that as the workers are going to urban areas, their non-food expenditure goes up, because now they start investing more in education, more in health. There are sometimes they go in some recreational activities also. Considering that thing, I think there's formula has to be there, that particularly for a particular zone, for example in metropolitan area, what are the consumer behaviors. So all these things should be dovetailed to consumers behaviors or workers behavior, and accordingly this fixation should be done.
Absolutely. Mr. Dice, how do we adopt a more practical approach, because given the fact that workers would migrate to urban centers?
I think the practical approach will evolve, because the code clearly speaks about an advisory board, and I'm more than sure that you'll have very eminent economists and others who would be associated with this exercise. So therefore, I do believe over a period of time, it would be a fairly robust system.
Coming to that point of migration, you see, migration is a natural phenomenon. For centuries and centuries, people have been migrating. We all have come from the continent of Africa, and that was nothing but a migration. So people moved out of Africa, went all over the world. Similarly, people will keep moving from rural areas to urban areas, from the smaller urban centers to the bigger urban centers, because everybody is in search of an employment, number one. Everybody is in search of a safe and secure place, number two. And third, everybody is in search for a place which is better in terms of education, which is better in terms of health services, which is better in terms of social infrastructure, entertainment. So this will happen, and whatever we do, we will never be able to check that. Having said that, when people migrate from place 1 to place B, it is necessary for the government or the enforcement agency to create some kind of a mechanism so that they get decent wages to take care of their families, the educational needs of their children, the health needs of their family, and they have to look after their own self and things like that, and food and shelter.
Absolutely. So we were talking about the Central Advisory Board.
Yeah.
Dr. Singh, tell us about the constitution of this board.
No, in fact, it's a very important thing they have put in this particular code, because in fact they have kept in mind that there has to be equal participation from all stakeholders. So keeping that in mind, as per the constitutional board goes, there will be 12 members from the employee side, 12 members from the employee side, there will be one chairperson, there will be 3 members of parliament, 3 persons will be from different state tribunals, there will be 5 officers from the Department of Labour from different states who will be on the rotation basis, not below the level of principal secretary or commissioner of the labour, and then there will be one member secretary from Ministry of Labour and Employment. So this is the entire constitution of the CAB.
Mr. Dice, the functions and responsibilities of Central Advisory Board.
I think they have a very, very important role to play, particularly what we've seen recently that happened in Delhi, when the Delhi minimum wages were revised and the matter went to the Delhi High Court, and now the matter is pending before the Supreme Court. I do believe the advisory board will have a very major role to play, and they will have to therefore set the standards for the future in determining wages appropriately.
Absolutely. Mr. Agarwal, experts are also saying that one of the fundamental problems is the distinction between skilled and unskilled laborers, because these are industry specific and many unskilled laborers also acquire skill as they work. So how would we make this distinction?
Ma'am, there are 2 schools of thought. One says that the government should be saddled with the problem of fixing minimum wages or the floor wages for the entire country. Thereafter, it should be left to the market to determine the wages. If somebody is highly skilled, he will get more wages because he will be able to demand more wages. So that is one school of thought. The other school of thought says that it is the responsibility of the government to fix wages for different categories of skills also. That means unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, highly skilled kind of thing. One is not very sure, and a lot of economists are of the view that the government should not interfere in this business. On the other hand, for a welfare state, it becomes very necessary, because whatever we say and whatever we may claim, but fact of the matter is that large number of people who come under the category of workers, they are not very well aware, they do not know the rights. Even if they don't know about their right, it becomes extremely difficult to go to a competent authority to ask for those rights, and it is a time consuming and a money consuming kind of a thing. Workers will not be in a position to get that kind of a justice from different courts. Under these circumstances, it becomes very, very important for a welfare state to have some kind of a minimum wages in each of these categories. So I personally feel, and I debated this issue with the Planning Commission at that point of time. Somehow the Planning Commission at that point, Niti Ayog, not Niti Ayog.
Niti Ayog, yes sir.
Niti Ayog at that point of time was of the view that the government should not interfere in this business and this should be left to the market forces. But we disagreed, and I am very happy that government, ultimately the competent authority in the government agreed with us. They said yes, for each category of the skill there should be a certain minimum level which every employer has to pay to the worker.
Dr. Singh, those are the genuine concerns raised by Mr. Agarwal. So how do we strike a balance?
See, particularly in skill arena, again we need to do a lot of work, because what happens, like if we see diverse country like India, wherein we are not able to map the type of skills with a particular industry cluster. For example, a person, I may be highly skilled for a particular industry, for example in production industry, for example I may be a good turner, but at the same time as I migrate to some different cluster wherein my skills become entirely different. So what happens, like in fact we have strongly pushed that there has to be a system of certification wherein the worker can get a category whether it is unskilled, skilled, semi-skilled or highly skilled. In fact, if you see that Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, they have come with the concept of this NSDC, which has formed around 38 sector skill councils. They are all driven by the industry. And one of the best part of the sector skill councils is that they have mapped the scales of a particular geography in a particular territory with type of industry that particular area is having, so that there is a proper sort of a synchronization between the skills of a particular cluster and the industry requirement, so as to bridge this demand supply of gap of the skills. But as we know that as we are deliberating that people are migrating to different regions in order to improve their quality of life, searching for better revenues for themselves, for their family. So in such circumstances, there is no single criteria which actually certifies me whether I am a skilled person, I am a semi-skilled, I am an unskilled or a highly skilled person. Because again, there is a very minor gap between a skilled person and a highly skilled person. And in fact, there is a lot of judgment which says that, you know, even if a person is semi-skilled, over the period of time with the on the job, you know, training, the person becomes skilled.
Yes.
But industry still categorize that worker as unskilled for many, you know, months altogether. So until unless there is a proper certification that I am skilled or I am semi-skilled in a particular job category, I should show this certificate when I am going to any industry, and I should be accepted accordingly. So for that, we have pushed a lot of, you know, sort of a debate. In fact, we have given a lot of representations to government also, that for any, you know, employment, whether it's in public or in private sector, there should be a certification and accreditation mechanism, so that everybody, a proper benchmark is set, a standardization is there that I am a semi-skilled person in this category, and no questions will be asked, that already because I have been tested, I have been proven by the industry benchmarks. So in fact, we need to categorize these things in a very, very serious way, and accordingly the minimum wages for a semi-skilled, unskilled, skilled or highly skilled should be customized or dovetailed as per the type of skills or qualifications a particular worker is having.
And you also have to develop a very dynamic system for categorization.
Exactly.
But Mr. Dice, the onus largely lies on the states. How do we get the states on board for successful implementation of these rules? Of course, we understand that these are draft rules.
Well, I think the states are doing their best in the given circumstances. Having been associated with the Ministry of Labour and Employment for the last many years, my observation has been that unfortunately the amount of money that needs to be invested in this area is not there. I mean, to the extent that basic facilities like telephones and other things, they are at times lacking. So I find that they are hard pressed in trying to make both ends sort of meet. Having said that, I think the other dimension that needs to be kept in mind, because in the code you see they talk about inspector cum facilitator.
Yes.
That's a very important aspect. Now, if you see the earlier enactment in the earlier labour laws, what happened? There you had a labour enforcement officer, you had a labour enforcement officer, and you had a conciliation officer. And it used to be a challenging problem for these officers, because in the morning he would be prosecuting you before the magistrate's court, and in the afternoon he would be trying to conciliate with you to find an amicable solution. So I think we need to draw this line better, we need to bring in more clarity, and I think the government will have to work hard to ensure that that facilitator is truly a facilitator and not the inspector of earlier times.
And develop a robust system.
Absolutely.
Mr. Agarwal, I'll give you the last word on the show. How will these rules prevent exploitation of workers and labourers?
These rules have been framed with the main objective of safeguarding our workers. Idea is that each and every worker should have three kinds of security, as you said in the very beginning. First is the wage security, and when we say wage security, it means certain minimum wages, and that is the end of the matter. Thereafter, depending upon the skill, like whether the person is skilled or semi-skilled or that kind of thing, he or she will demand that kind of wage. That is one. Second is the social security, because whatever we say that in case of harness, in case of death, in case of some disability, it becomes extremely difficult for a worker to take care of the family. So for that, we have to have a very robust, very simple and very good security, social security system. And the third is basically, in addition to wage, a job security. Again, it's a little controversial kind of a subject. When we say job security, it does not mean that the employees cannot be dehired. It doesn't say that hiring and firing. It says that depending upon the demand, depending upon the market forces. Today maybe I require a particular kind of phone. Tomorrow I may be needing something different. So my factory will go out of the production because I am unable to adopt the new system of production. So what do? If I carry on with those workers, I'll be sunk, workers will be sunk, and I'll be in no position to make the wages.
Yes.
So what we are trying to do, that there should be some kind of a job security, and that can be done, that whenever we dehire somebody, he gets some kind of a decent severance package, and with that package he or she will be able to pull on for a year or two, and during that time he or she can acquire new skills and he or she can be absorbed in new kind of industry.
Absolutely, and we take care of the demand and supply concerns. Dr. Singh, last 30 seconds to you.
Yeah. So in fact, what I see that whatever rules are being framed, they have to be taken in letter and spirit. It's not that just you have to follow the rules, but it has to be in full spirits also. And in that, I think technology has to play a very, very important role.
Absolutely.
Particularly as Mr. Dai said about inspector cum facilitator. Now we have this web-based, inspection system. That is one of the, turning points, particularly embracing technology for this labor reform. And at the same time, and as we are going into fourth industrial revolution where the market dynamics are changing like anything. So whatever rules are being framed, they have to be pro-industry, keeping the human element in mind, because it is all about the mindset. Whenever we are perceiving or making any labor code, we have to see the industry as one of the unit, and at the same